Do politicians in the advanced democracies engage in political defections?
The answer is yes.
Well, it is no longer news that in Nigeria, politicians move and or switch from one political party to another, citing all sorts of reasons, both reasonable and otherwise. Among the contemporary Nigerian politicians that we have, very few of them have remained in their original parties for years. For example, Sule Lamido. According to Khalid Idris Nuhu of Yobe State University, political defection is strengthened by the proliferation of political parties devoid of entrenched ideology or political philosophy, besides attaining political and economic powers. Well, analysts think, and some of them do believe, that the scale, magnitude, and indeed frequency of the kind of defection that we see in Nigeria can weaken our democracy. But as we sit down debating political defections in Nigeria and whether or not they are good, do you know that this very attitude or practice also happens in the West and in the East? Yes, you will be shocked to know that some of the most popular American politicians have switched parties. We don't have to go back to the history and look at people like President Theodore Roosevelt. Let's just stick to a recent memory by looking at one of America's most handsome and indeed popular presidents, who was even a Hollywood actor in his 20s before later becoming the most powerful man on earth at 69. Ronald Wilson Reagan was in the Democratic Party, the Obama's party for the Gen Zs. Then he made a popular statement upon defecting to the Republican Party, that is the Trump's party, that he did not leave the Democratic Party, the party left him. Other prominent American politicians who enjoyed the wave of defection are Hillary Clinton, former First Lady, former Senator, and indeed former US top diplomat, that is Secretary of State, who wanted to be the very first female US president in the history of the most powerful nation on earth. She was Republican and later defected to Democrat. Another guy that most of our young people do not know, maybe because of the nature of his job, is Liam Panetta, former CIA director and former Secretary of Defense, both under Obama. He was a Republican and later defected to the Democrat. The current US president is a man named Donald John Trump, who values loyalty to the core. Some of his cabinet members are people who defected to his party from the opposition. For example, Tulsi Gabbard, who was a congresswoman, meaning a member of the House of Representatives under the Democratic Party, is now the Director of National Intelligence, a very sensitive position in Trump's MAGA presidency. She defected from the Democrat to Republican. RFK Jr. or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was a Democrat who even campaigned in 2023 to be the US president. Now he is serving as the Secretary of Health, equivalent to Minister of Health under Donald John Trump's presidency. These are just a few out of the many US politicians that have followed the wave of defection for their own reasons. Gina London, an award-winning former CNN journalist and now communications consultant, has got this to say to the people reacting to the politicians enjoying the sweetness of defection.
So really, like in any situation when a political party member changes sides, it's important to be critical thinkers. Why are they doing it? What's at stake? What's their political gain? Are they serving the constituents' interests? Are they serving their own?
Now across the ocean in the United Kingdom, the story is going to make some of you even more transfixed and, as a matter of hyperbole, I would say breathless.
Now, you might think, when you look at your politicians in Nigeria, that they are more dysfunctional, more detached from the interests of the ordinary people than those that we have here in the UK, in Britain and in Europe.
Hugh Fraser, a former BBC journalist, in that clip you have just watched, was echoing the sheer gravity of distrust that exists between especially citizens and the politicians. Have you seen a connection? In terms of defection, Hugh Fraser gave an example of Winston Churchill, who switched to Liberal Party and then came back to the Conservative Party, the party of David Cameron, Theresa May, and Rishi Sunak. These days in the UK, we have seen a sharp increase in new parties, and people are trooping into them. For example, there is Reform Party led by Nigel Farage. Jeremy Corbyn, former Labour Party leader, is also teaming up to come up with a brand new party.
New parties. So in this country, Reform is the most popular party. It's very new. The first time it stood for election was at the last election. Now, according to the opinion polls, it would win a big majority. And it's led by someone you might have heard of called Nigel Farage, who rose to prominence as the sort of voice advocating for Brexit, for Britain leaving the European Union.
Finally, what do you think about the Narendra Damodar Das Modi's India? Well, a lot of people think that India and Nigeria share a lot in common and are bound by Bollywood. Well, there are countless examples of political defections in Indian politics, including one politician, a guy from Haryana named Gaya Lal, who changed parties 3 times in 2 weeks, sometime in 1967. This is amazing. His actions earned him a place in Indian political history, with the phrase Aya Ram Gaya Ram becoming synonymous with party-hopping politicians. Wow. These people don't get tired of amusing us. For us to get the hang of the enormous effect that this phenomenon has had on this country, which is believed to be one of the world's fastest growing economies and the largest democracy, I got in touch with Dr. Bhat, a media expert and an analyst based in India.
The last 15 years or so, Indian politics has become more about politicians rather than about party and ideology. So individual politicians have become more prominent, more visible, and politics has become more centered around their leadership or their personality. In other words, Indian politics has become more Americanized, more presidential style elections.
I know some of you may still want us to answer this burning question. Why do politicians defect? Well, in the case of all the countries that we have cited, the reasons all come back to A, personal interests, which includes personal gains, ambitions, and career advancement. And in Nigeria, for one's political sins to be wiped out, just defect to the ruling party. Nigerians are fully aware of that. B, ideological differences, which include disagreements with party policies and or leadership. In Nigeria, critics believe that political ideology is, in capital letters, absent. And last but not least, party dynamics, stuff like weak party structures, leadership conflicts, and lack of inner party democracy, or as we call it, internal democracy. So next time when you hear someone saying politicians in other countries don't do defection, direct them to PAP Explains.